Many years ago, I had a dream about opening a club which would only open its doors between the months of October and April. A warm, welcoming place with roaring log fires and cozy nooks where you could sit with your friends and chat about things that interest you. Well, I couldn't even begin to afford to open a club, so the dream died. But its passing is commemorated by this podcast, presenting, for the winter months, a series of cozy chats with friends old and new on topics of interest. Welcome to the October Club. You're travelling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey to a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of your imagination. Next stop, Slough, because that's where my guest tonight comes from. Her name is Elaine Bladukiene, and she's the co-host of the board game review channel No Pun Included, and she's also a friend of mine. Tonight, as you may have guessed from that introduction, we'll be discussing the Twilight Zone. Yeah, thanks for joining me, Elaine. Welcome to the October Club.
Thank you for inviting me.
You might be wondering why you've been asked to talk about the Twilight Zone. It's just because that was one of the things many years ago. I think you were one of the few people I knew who was kind of interested in the Twilight Zone back then.
I wrote something for you for your actual magazine.
You did,
wrote an article that some years ago.
Never ever got published.
That would be what I saw in the email. It said, I'll send you one when it's published. And I thought, I don't remember ever getting that. That would be why. It didn't happen.
Yeah, so the Twilight Zone, it was finished long before either of us was finished, a long time before I was born, so a very long time before you were born.
The original series,
yeah. How did you get into it?
You know, I don't actually know. And if I wrote something for you in that article and said this is how I got into it, that's probably true, but I don't remember any longer it being so much further in the future, and my memory not being what it was. But I know, I really don't know. I can only think that it was, so my dad and his brother, my uncle, have always been into like sci-fi, and particularly growing up in Slough where Thunderbirds was filmed. You know, that was a thing in our lives, in my life, all the time growing up. And I always liked like the EC comics, like Vault of Fear and those kinds of comics as well. And my dad really likes comics, so that kind of passed on to me. But I don't know specifically how I got into the Twilight Zone. I feel like in a very Twilight Zone-y way that I kind of just entered it at one time and it never left me. But it just appeared. I remember watching. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say I don't think it was being shown at the time when you were growing up.
It might have been. It might have been that my uncle had it on like DVD or Laserdisc or whatever was at the time. VHS probably. It may have been Betamax. I don't know. Whatever he had. Or it may have been something that did pop up on the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't know if it still exists, but there was the Sci-Fi Channel that we had at home, and it may have just popped up on that, and I might have seen, random episodes, because I don't ever remember watching it like from episode 1 forward. It was just this episode, then that episode. I think it probably had popped up on Sci-Fi Channel or something like that. But it just really stuck with me because it was kind of like those EC comics, but on telly, and it had these messages that I think, I mean, obviously when I watched it initially when I was a lot younger, they came through in a different way to how they do now. But that was kind of how I got into it, I suppose. Just being entranced by it.
Yeah, I mean, when I got into the Twilight Zone was in the early 80s, and they were showing them on BBC Two. They used to show like double bills. My memory of it was that they showed double bills, but I looked back on the BBC Genome recently. I don't know if you've ever been on there, but it's fantastic. Gives you all the old listings from decades ago. And it said on there they only showed one at a time, so my memory
Oh.
must have been a bit false there. But I didn't realize that then in the 80s was the first time it had been shown on British television.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is that
I
true?
thought it had been shown, back in the 60s. But
Did they do it as a kind of lead up to the 80s Twilight Zone? Was it around that time, like 85-ish?
it was slightly before that, because I'm trying to remember it was which house my parents were living in at the time. So I'm guessing it was about 82, 83. So I think it was probably as a tie-in with the film.
The that
Twilight
film,
Zone, the movie. So I'm guessing that's what probably inspired them to show it.
Yeah, that I don't know if I still have it, but I did have that film on VHS. I know I did.
Yeah, I like the film. I mean, I probably saw that about. I don't think it was the first thing I'd seen, but very early on I saw that film. It was always slightly overshadowed by obviously the tragedy that occurred on it.
Yes.
And you look back at it now and you think they'd have just canned it now. They wouldn't have carried on and put the film out.
Through. No, they probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't. And a lot of people would have been asked questions about what had happened. Yeah. No, that was an awful thing that happened with it. But I mean, I did like the film, but as much as I like any kind of anthology sort of horror film, like I don't know, The Vault of Terror is that's one, I think. Or those kinds of films with Vincent Price and whatever, and Roy Castle was in one of them. So I liked it, but I didn't think it was particularly Twilight Zone, even though, and I think a lot of people felt like, I don't think this is a hot take. I think a lot of people felt like, even though like the majority of the stories, I think there was 4 stories in it, and I think 3 of them were not original stories. They had been done as Twilight Zone episodes, and even those, I mean, the obvious one that comes to mind is like Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. They had been done again, and I don't know if they did anything better or newer or fresher than the episodes, and to have them in kind of just back to back, it was like watching 4 back-to-back episodes that were completely disjointed, and sometimes that works, but I don't know if there was enough of a tie-in of them all for that to really shine. But I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, I get the impression that sort of Steven Spielberg and John Landis were of an age that they were kids or teenagers in the early 60s when it was first on, and it was made with a lot of love for the original series, but they weren't being fantastically faithful to the original series. They were just doing it in their own style, sort of thing. Which
is fine, and sometimes you get something. I mean, some of the Twilight Zone episodes, are based on original stories by blah blah blah. But you really need. And I'm not saying like Spielberg isn't a good director, but you really need like a good screenwriter to transport that, to transform that into what you want it to be. And if you base it too much on the original material was great, then I don't know if you get a little bit lax with it, and you go, everyone's going to recognize this, it's going to be a blast from the past for everyone watching this, they're going to love it anyway. But I think you are right, like there was a lot of love within it.
I mean the writers on the original series were fantastic. I mean, obviously Rod Serling, but also Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont and others. But I remember watching it, I think it was the first time as a teenager that I watched something and thought, I can see that the writing on this is really good. It was the first time I was kind of getting to an age where I recognized that it was very well written.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I don't know. I think that happens for a lot of people that grow up with the Twilight Zone and kind of get older and then watch it again, and you see it in a different light. When I saw them originally, the stories that really stuck out for me were the ones that had that real twist at the end. But now, when I watch them again, the stories that don't necessarily have a twist as such, that I previously thought were maybe a little bit lengthy or a little bit, what's going on here? What's happening here? I didn't really understand the point of it. But watching them now, that point becomes clearer, and the message behind what is actually happening becomes a lot clearer. And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but a particular example that pops into my head is like Death Heads Revisited, which a lot of people like. But there's no, the ones that I like now, they don't really have that magician's curtain, whereas the ones that I liked previously did have that magician's curtain, because guessing the ending or the twist was part of the fun of what is going to happen here. And now, where there's not that curtain, or where the story still stands up really well after you already know what's happening, like a Death's Head Revisited, where everyone watching knows, apart from kind of the main character, knows that they are seeing a ghost from their past. Like, we all know this. There's no surprise there, but they don't realize that until much further into the episode. And I think those are the ones that really stick with me now.
I think the whole twist thing can they did some fantastic twists, don't get me wrong, but it can be a bit of a curse once you get known for that, because when sort of, certainly by the later ones, where they're feeling they've kind of got to put in some kind of twist, it's not always as good as it might be. I think on television it's hard to do as well without overplaying the twist, but they do it very well in the Twilight Zone, better than a lot of other series.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think Rod Serling was a very good dramatist and a very good writer and a very good screenwriter. He's definitely up there with my favorite writers. Forget kind of genre of writer, writer generally, because he did manage to pull those off, and as a kid, like finding out that twist of things like the one with Roddy McDowall, People Are Alike All Over. Where you don't know what is happening. Like, everyone is saying, oh well, everyone on Mars is going to be just the same as on Earth. And then they are. It turns out they are. And apologies to anyone who hasn't watched the Twilight Zone and is getting these spoilers for the episode. But you've had 50 years or whatever it is.
I don't think we can bother about spoilers here.
So, but things like that where there is that twist. I think they are really well written, and like I said, some of those stories, even when you know what that twist is, when you rewatch it, you see it in a different way. You're listening more to how the people are interacting with each other, and what they are worried about and what their concerns are when they go to Mars. That kind of thing, and how they think the people are going to be. Are they all going to be these monsters? Oh no, they're just going to be like people on Earth. Well, actually they are these monsters, And I think that kind of I don't know who wrote that episode. I don't know who wrote that episode, but the strength of some of the Twilight Zone episodes was that there was a huge amount of humanity within them, and even on rewatches, where even when the curtain is pulled up, even when you know the twist, the story still stands up on its own, because there are different things to explore within that. The relationships between people, the kind of mental state of people, the mentality of people, as humans, and kind of their prejudices and their feelings towards certain types of people. So I think you're right, like those twists worked because and the story still works even after you know the twist because of those things.
Like you say, you see different things in it. Certainly as you get older, you see different things in it.
And I know that, you know, the Twilight Zone is quite often compared to other series. And I think that's a bit mean, because I think that they are all different. You know, if you think of like Tales of the Unexpected or One Step Beyond or Tales of Tomorrow, or you know, I enjoy all of those, but they all do quite different things. And Black Mirror, even, you know, that got a lot of comparison to the Twilight Zone, unfairly, I think. You know, they're all series that I like. Inside Number 9, you know, they're all series that I enjoy, but they don't quite. When you do know what the twist is in some of them, you kind of don't want to watch the episode again, because that is the thing that you were waiting for, and now it's happened. There's not much more to the episode apart from that big reveal.
I watched Tales of the Unexpected all the way through a couple of years ago, not having seen them since I was a teenager. And I did like a lot of the twists and that in it, but I don't think they're pulled off as well. And also, particularly Roald Dahl's stories, if you read the original short stories, the way he portrays the twist in print is very subtle. You have to kind of work it out for yourself. It's not in your face, but kind of on television, they kind of have to do it in your face for you to even be able to get it. So in that way, I don't think Tales of the Unexpected works as well as the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone had that subtlety. I don't think Tales of the Unexpected does.
No, I don't think. I mean, Roald Dahl, you know, is a popular writer, but I don't think his introductions necessarily had that gravitas that Rod Serling's did, or even John Newland's, you know, did as well. Like they just didn't have that oomph behind them, and I think that also makes a big difference to how you view the story, but from what viewpoint that you are expected to view the story from. Of
course, Rod Serling originally, he didn't want to do it. He wanted an actor to do it. But they couldn't get anybody.
Was it Orson Welles?
He wanted Orson Welles. He wouldn't do it, and all the other people they looked at weren't suitable. So eventually, he just said, "I'll just do it myself."
Well, I think he was perfect for doing it, you know. And when I've seen, I don't know if you've ever seen any interviews with him, but he speaks in exactly the same way. It's not like when he spoke those lines of dialogue, they weren't him speaking. You know, they were absolutely him speaking. And in interviews, he is just as eloquent, just as thought out. Every beat is thought out. Every beat nails, you know, what he wants to say. And I think that is a big strength.
Yeah. I mean, he's a compelling speaker. I mean, I sat and watched a sort of hour-long thing of him talking about American politics, and I have very little interest in American politics. But his way of putting it across was kind of so compelling that I just thought, he's just... no wonder he's able to sell these stories to you, because
I saw him, or I heard him narrate, I can't remember what it was called. It was something about like alien worlds or something.
Oh yes,
and it was nonsense. It was complete nonsense. But the way he speaks, you believe everything he's saying. He's an extremely good orator, and you know, he just has something behind those words that you can feel. And you just believe what he's telling you. You just get sucked in to those thoughts, you know, that way of thinking. And as I think as a not a child necessarily, but a young adult, that really got into my head.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite episodes now, this is going back to you saying that how you see different things in them. One of my favorite episodes now is the mirror image, which is the one where the woman is in the bus station and she keeps seeing, like, there's two suitcases and things, and eventually there's a duplicate of her. And when you see that as a kid, you just see it as, that she's got like a evil twin sort of thing. That's how you see it. But as an adult, you put yourself in her situation and you realize how terrifying that would be in that isolated situation of being in a bus station with nobody else around.
I think you are spot on there. Seeing it as an adult and knowing more about not knowing more or experiencing more about how your brain does different things in different situations. I think some of the episodes of the Twilight Zone that I like, but that kind of annoy me a little bit, are the ones where someone says this thing is happening to me, like that, like a mirror image, and nobody quite believes them, and it's always like, oh well, go to the doctor, get a sedative of some kind. It's always like, what are you talking about? And no one ever quite believes what they're saying. And I guess most of the time, they actually need a bit of help.
Yes,
but they're not afforded that help. They are just seen as unhinged. And that's the twist, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite often. It's quite often a little bit dated now as well, because in a lot of them it's a woman, isn't it? And the attitude is very kind of a hysterical woman.
Well, yeah,
it can't be real because in that sense it's not aged well, but I don't know. I think you have to look past it.
There are some with the men as well. There are some with men who just they clearly need some. The episode. There's quite a few episodes. I mean, there's themes. There's themes in the Twilight Zone, but one of the themes that sort of goes through some of the episodes is wanting to regain your childhood, and that's almost always a man.
Yes.
Or if not even regain your childhood, revisit or re-explore your childhood. Even though, there's an episode. I think it's called The Wonderful World of Horace Ford, where he goes back in. He ends up going back in time, but no one quite believes him. But he's a very childlike character. He doesn't just kind of have a childlike. He does have a childlike way about him, but in an annoying way, where he can't kind of cope in the adult world. And then he goes back and finds out that actually his childhood wasn't as great as he thought it had been. He'd seen everything through this rose-colored glasses, I guess is the phrase. But there's other episodes where, like A Stop at Willoughby, where someone just really wants to have a quieter and a more peaceful way of life, or walking distance as well, where people go back in time to their childhood. And they're almost always men that do that, and I don't know if that's because men in that era were traditionally seen as more pressured because they were in high pressured jobs where they had a lot more responsibility. I don't know, but so it's not always the women that are kind of frantic.
I think there's also the factor that a lot of the writers, almost all of the writers in it, will have been through at least one war. Obviously they've got that going on, where they're kind of thinking, I wish I hadn't seen that. It's very Ray Bradbury, Ray Bradbury's all about that. It's all about how much better and easier everything was in his childhood. But I like how the Twilight Zone explores that and finds out that A, it's not necessarily real, or B, to go back to that time there is a big penalty. Like you die or something, like in A Stop at Willoughby, like the end is he's actually dead when he does manage to go back to Willoughby, things like that. But I think we're all like that. Even now, people are like that. I mean, I think, it'd be nice to go back to when I was a child in the 70s. And then I think if I went back to the 70s, the first thing I'd notice is everything smelled of cigarette smoke. Everywhere, inside shops, in hospitals, everywhere would have smelled like that. And you forget those are the things you forget about. But you just think of the happy things when you're a child, and you forget that there were a lot of things that wouldn't be the same. Yeah.
I think there's those episodes do show the penalty of nostalgia and why that is not necessarily a good thing. There's another one called, I think it's called Short Drink at a Fountain or something like that, where a guy is older with a younger wife and he wants to be younger. And the narration is like he should be enjoying the winter of his life, but he's trying to get back the spring of his life or something like this. And I think that's quite a profound message, in that rather than enjoying the time that we are in now and appreciating the changes that have happened, like things like LGBT rights or whatever now, we are looking back and going, oh, wasn't it better when, the world was like this? Well, no, it wasn't. When everyone had cholera or whatever, no, it wasn't. So I think the Twilight Zone quite accurately depicts the penalties of looking at things like that.
Yeah. I think most of the writers at that time as well were sort of approaching middle age. They didn't. I think television now has a lot of much younger writers in it, so you wouldn't really get that approach to it, that nostalgia for youth that you had back then.
I don't know. I think a lot of people still do have that. I don't think that's a particularly certain generation that has that. I think everyone goes, oh, well, it was nice when I was a kid. But was it? No, probably not. And the things, the way you experience the world as a child, is very different from how you experience it as an adult. And the things you remember happening as a child didn't necessarily happen. Memory is fallible, right? So, and there's quite a lot of things you probably ignored as a child as well that would have an effect on you now if you saw them or if you experienced them. But I mean, Rod Serling, was a veteran as well. So and I've read somewhere, or I saw somewhere, that the Twilight Zone was one of the ways to express the kind of traumas that he went through.
I mean, there's a strong pacifist streak through all of it. It's very pacifist. But he used to sneak that by the censors by kind of making it about sort of fantastical things,
I know he did say once, I saw an interview once where he said, oh, it's purely for entertainment. And you're looking at him going, no, it's not. You knew what you were doing. But by making it, but I mean, even some of the stories were, had a war setting. They took place with soldiers and with people against each other, fighting against each other or being against each other. So they weren't all completely hidden under the rug. The way that people, I mean, those stories always were pacifist. That I don't remember seeing one where there was a story that said this is the good guy and this is the bad guy. It was just two different sides, where the people could be brought together by something happening, and they quite often were.
It's like I like the Purple Testament.
Exactly.
Where Dick York, and that's another one where you see different things in it as an adult, because you have a character in it who sees this glow on the faces of his friends who are going off on patrol, and he knows they're not coming back because that means they're going to die. But when you look at it as an adult, you realize it's not about this kind of magic ability. It's the experience of the writer having been through the war, having looked in the faces of his friends who've gone off and then never come back. He's just writing about that. And I wonder if that's partly why some of the newer episodes, the remakes of the old episodes didn't work as well, because they didn't quite have that message. Because there was one like the like that episode, and I don't remember the name of it. It's called like the Shining Light or something, where a teacher could see the students that were going to die. And I don't know if that, or maybe if you are in that environment where you're worried about your students dying, I don't know, but I don't think it has quite the same weight behind it. And sometimes I think in the more modern ones, when they do something like that, it's a bit too on the nose. Like they did the remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, and I don't think I've seen any of the Jordan Peele ones.
Yes.
They did the remake in that, and it was very post 9/11. It was all about sort of a terrorist on the plane and things. And I just thought, oh, this is just too in your face. You know, there was very little subtlety to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. And I mean, some of the original Twilight Zones were a little bit like the message behind them.
Oh yeah,
was a bit on the nose. The political message, maybe not so much because of censors, but certainly there's an episode called The Mighty Casey that I didn't enjoy very much, about a robot that plays baseball.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I've never got on with that episode because the whole kind of ending of it is, oh well, now he can't play baseball because now he's got a heart and he cares about people. Oh right, okay, so he doesn't care about winning as much. Oh right, okay, like really, you know. So some of and for anyone that enjoys that episode, super. I'm glad you get something different out of it. But for me, that episodes like that were just a little bit too didactic, I suppose.
Yeah. The comedy episodes, I mean, if you read what fans have written these days, nobody really seems to like the comedy episodes. There are a couple of them that I like. I like Mr. Dingle the Strong.
Yeah, okay.
It's very silly, but I like Burgess Meredith's performance in it. I mean, he's what sells it. I mean, the story is stupid, but because of him, it's really good.
The ending of that one where, oh well, we're from Venus, oh well, we're from Mars. What? Okay, like it almost feels like we didn't quite know how to end this quite interesting episode. Where you know, this man becomes incredibly strong when he was incredibly not strong. Now he's going to become incredibly intelligent. Okay. Now what happens? Oh well, we're from Venus, we're from Mars. Okay. You know, it's some of the episodes are a little bit, I don't know if they were supposed to be comedy. And I think for some people that takes away from the real kind of messages of the Twilight Zone episodes. I think you can basically take whatever you want from each episode. That you know, no one's saying that this is the exact message of this, but with something like Mr. Dingle the Strong, you know, it was for me, it was about someone changing themselves to be more popular. You know, something magical happens, then they're changed, and then they are stronger, which means that they can do these impressive tricks, and then they're pulling in money for the bar or whatever it was that they were in, or they're really intelligent or whatever. And the message for me was that, you know, you can try and change yourself, but unless it's actually you, then it's going to fail. Because you know, it's clearly an outside influence pushing you towards that. And I think those comedy episodes can sometimes take away from the kind of underlying humanity that is in the episodes. Yeah,
because there's the other one where the chap is a compulsive liar. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, that's gone. But he's a kidnapped by aliens, and then nobody believes him. It's very Boy Who Cried Wolf.
And there's been, you know, like the film Liar Liar was kind of a similar sort of thing. There's been the invention of lying, you know, similar things in now in more contemporary media. But those. So what is the message that is trying to come across there? I don't know. I think sometimes those like comedy ones, or the ones that the ending of them just falls a bit flat. Can take away from that a little bit.
Yeah, they're rather broad. I think that's the problem with them.
I think the other thing is that having rewatched them and now doing a job that involves media, the directing and the way the lighting, the way they are filmed, has made more of an impression on me than it had previously. and I enjoy The Masks, which is directed by Ida Lupino, because I like Ida Lupino generally. So I thought that was a good episode anyway. And it had a good message behind it of, you know, you can't really hide who you are. You become that person. You can't forever pretend you're someone that you are not. And I think that kind of message and a pacifist message as well does trail through a lot of the episodes. You know, you can't go home, you can't change who you are. You know, you're just like everybody else, really. There's not much that separates you from any other person on this planet. And also that, like, it's a bit trite by now, and again, not a hot take, but that you kind of can take the soldier out of the war, but you can't take the war out of the soldier. You can't take the mentality away from someone who wants to be combative. You can't take the mentality away from someone who dislikes other people for no particular reason. But the way that the episodes work, like there's an episode, I think it's called Two, and it's just about two people who are from different sides of the war, like I think it's like Montgomery, the communists and the Americans or something, and they end up kind of meeting who, you know, the whole of the Bewitched cast was basically in the Twilight Zone at one time or another. But you know, that kind of message of when you actually meet the person behind the facade of of something that you are trying to present yourself as, then you are actually, you know, not that far removed from each other. You're essentially the same. So I like that kind of message.
Do you think there was an element in the early 60s that a certain group of people in America were sort of pushing towards a kind of, we have to get back to where we were pre-war, and sort of another group of people kind of saying, well, we can't really, once we've been through that, you know, it's but again, once you've seen it, you can't pretend that it hasn't happened.
I don't think that's peculiar to a certain time or a certain group of people. I think a lot of people, you know, like now are saying Thatcher's England was much better. Well, you know, they you know, but they've seen the ramifications of it, or you know, or it was much better during the war, like the Second World War. Was it really? You know, I think there's always going to be those people who feel that way. But you know, like we were saying before about the kind of Horace Fords of the world, you're never going to have that time back. And when you actually look at it, it probably wasn't a better time. So it's a very stuck mindset, I think, to feel like that.
It's interesting that they were kind of commenting on it in the Twilight Zone, because I don't think they were in many other American TV shows of the time.
Well, no, again, because there was a lot of censorship around being able to talk about that sort of thing, and something like the Twilight Zone that was fantasy and sci-fi got a bit closer to being able to talk about those things, whereas mainstream media wouldn't necessarily have been able to report on those things, or been able to give a viewpoint on those things. Whereas one man, or like one man and a group of writers, you know, could push that narrative a bit more. And I think that's why now we see it as progressive, and why it still fits within our time frame, why it doesn't seem dated. Because even though the difficulties might have changed slightly, or the things that we are concerned about immediately might have changed slightly, like I'm not worried about the Cold War particularly, but there are things that I am worried about. Like with the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, you know, there's always going to be people who want to blame someone for something. And it doesn't have to be that they're communists, or it doesn't have to be that they're this or that, but there will always be the scapegoats of the world, you know, and that will change depending on who is the least flavour of the month, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's still something that we struggle with now in our society, and it was something they struggled with then.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favourites in that respect of being a theme that sort of carries on through every generation is a game of pool.
Yes,
because
I love that episode.
you're always going to have somebody who is embittered because they weren't the best at something. You know, it's a never-ending sort of theme.
That's an episode that when I watched it when I was younger, I was like, eh.
Yeah.
But now when I watch it, the meaning for me has changed, and particularly because I like Jack Klugman. You know, he was great in anything that he did.
Yeah.
So
he's in
and it always helps. It always he was. I like them all actually that he was in. But you know, there are some actors that you know when they're in the episode is probably going to be a good one. But yeah, the message with that of trying to be the best and the consequences of being the best.
Yeah.
You know, they come through pretty clearly of what you sacrifice to do that.
Yeah.
And we've seen it, you know, in Olympians and things like that now in the news, where they say, I can't do this anymore because to be the best is taking away so much more from my life.
Yeah. It's like, I suppose in the modern day, it's when you hear of film actors or musicians kind of saying, I'm going to retire, I'm not going to do any more. And people are going, well, why? You know, you're fantastic, you're incredibly popular. And you're thinking, well, that's why they don't want to do it anymore, because the popularity is crushing them. And
I think you have to, those episodes make you consider why you are doing something, for what reason you are doing it. And I think that's an important message. You know, are you doing it because you like it and you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Or are you doing it simply because you feel you have to in order to stay on top? And if that is not the case, then maybe you need to rethink why you're doing it. So I think there's a lot of lessons, you know, and in the opening and closing narrations, Rod Serling often says, you know, lesson from the Twilight Zone, or whatever. And they really are kind of things to think about in your life generally, and how you treat people and how you treat yourself in relation to other people. Yeah.
Have you had many dealings with Twilight Zone fans?
No.
Right. Yeah, because it's interesting because until I did, I mean, I haven't for a long time, but they were used to, on the old discussion forums, there was a one called Fifth Dimension. And until I went on there, I didn't realize that there were some episodes divided opinion. And some people really hated certain episodes. I was a big fan of The Howling Man. And there's some people that just despise it. Some people really, really dislike it. It's very strange.
Yeah, that was a Charles Beaumont one, I think, and I pretty much like most of what he did, or what I've forgotten his name. Jerry Soule. There we go, Jerry Soule, because he ghost wrote for Charles Beaumont too.
Yeah,
and I pretty much like all of those. But I don't think it's ever worth worrying yourself too much about what other people have seen into something if you haven't. You know, it's the same with music or with film. If you have taken something away from that episode, then it has value to you.
Yeah.
And if someone else really, I think that's why I don't tend to hang around in forums, particularly any longer. Why did you like that one particularly?
I don't know. I think it loses it at the end because obviously the special effect of the chap going behind the columns and coming out the other end as the devil is not fantastic by modern standards, and it's again a bit on the nose. But I like the beginning of it, the idea that this traveler doesn't believe this hermit who's saying, this guy in the basement is the devil. Even when things in his own mind are saying, how can he be kept in there just by a little shepherd's crook on the door? How can that keep him in? Even when his own mind is going, it's not logical that he can't just walk out of here. He still refuses to believe that it could be the devil. And that's the kind of element of it that I like. It gets a bit sort of obvious at the end. But I just like the look of the story.
Yeah. Again, like I was saying, I now appreciate the cinematography and the directing a lot more than I did previously. And I think the Twilight Zone did quite clever things quite often with not massive budgets, and didn't have things like animatronics or CGI, that sort of thing. And if they wanted to show you a battlefield, because they couldn't actually show an entire battlefield, would just show the responses of what the soldiers were seeing on the battlefield. They would do quite a lot of clever things like that. And when it's done well, you don't even notice that something is missing. And then you get something like, or even the Twilight Zone film, when there's these like puppets in it and you're going, what are they? Or like you were saying, the kind of comedy episodes when there's someone from a different planet and you're going, oh, really? And it takes away something. And I think those episodes lose something when you are shown exactly what you are, because there is a mystery, there is always mystery in the Twilight Zone of there's a suspension of disbelief of, this is happening, but you don't need to be explained that this is happening. You just know it is happening. So when you're shown visuals of this, it does take something away. But there weren't that many episodes that did that. I think there was a lot more suspense in the directing and the cinematography of them.
An episode that I think really is successful because of the cinematography is Eye of the Beholder, because the story of that is actually, it's really obvious where that's going.
Yes.
There's no secret that it's going to be, she's beautiful, everybody else is ugly. I mean, you can see exactly where that's going, but the way it's filmed carries it along, and it's probably one of the best episodes.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do like that episode, but I think I always preferred the episodes. So the episode number 12, Looks Just Like You, had a similar kind of thing where someone is normal looking, I guess, for want of a better phrase, and they are being made to try and fit in with the beauty standards of whatever society they're living in. So the theme isn't a million miles away, and I think I preferred number 12, Looks Like You, because the person was actively rebelling against it, saying, why do I have to look like you? Why do I have to look like everyone else? Won't that make everyone the same? Isn't the specialness within us that we are all different? This, and I think in Eye of the Beholder, I know it is really popular and it is really well shot. But I just thought, oh, this person who's just going along with this the entire time, they're so sad that they didn't get to look like everyone else. And I think for me, that was a less good message, I suppose. Because like you say, the twist was obvious. She was going to look completely different. Right. No, it's not.
Nobody could accuse it of being subtle, but
no.
But it does look the way the use of shadow and whatever, it looks beautiful.
Yes, it does. But, it does.
So I think when people say that it's brilliantly written, you think it's not really brilliantly written, but it is brilliantly directed.
Yes. Yeah. I think, there was some episodes like The Four of Us Are Dying. I enjoyed the directing of that, because I thought that was quite hard to pull off, because the guy changes his face and, he looks in the mirror and he's one face, and then it kind of cuts away a little bit and then he looks at it again and it's a different face, or we look again into the mirror and it's a different face. And I thought that was particularly well done, because it wasn't jarring. It didn't sort of swish pan and then, there he is. And you knew exactly the character you were supposed to be seeing was the same person that just had a different face. But and the message behind that I thought was good as well, that he was trying to he was always trying to run away from something by changing his face, but didn't actually succeed at doing that. Because it doesn't matter who you change into, you're always going to have something, chasing you, really. So I quite like that. But yeah, I thought that was well done, and there were a lot of well shot episodes. I thought, lighting was good. There are a couple which I'm not going to name that I thought, why did they shoot this like this? Like, I can't see anything. The camera's all in people's faces. But they did have a lot of guest directors, I guess, that only did one episode, never seemed to be seen again. Probably. What I thought was, talking of directors though, the masks that Ida Lupino directed, she was in 44mm Shrine as well. And I thought it was interesting that I don't know if you've ever watched the Columbo series, because she's in an episode of Columbo as well, basically doing the same thing, which I thought was quite funny. She's watching films of herself. Whatever her character is called in either of those. She's watching films of herself going, I wish I was, back then and beautiful and whatever. Obviously the ending is very different. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that she basically is the same character.
It's interesting.
And I don't know if that's a callback or not on purpose.
It could be. It's interesting that some of the when you read lists of the best remembered episodes, some of them you look at and they're not that great in the way that, we've mentioned Nightmare at 20,000 Feet before. I don't think it's one of the better directed episodes. I think the stuff with the gremlin is very stagey. It's beautifully acted and beautifully written, but
I suppose so. And I wonder if it's just a tiredness that we have for those episodes, like It's a Good Life as well. That they have been done. They've been parodied so many times that whatever was the kernel of that has dissipated a long time ago. And now you watch it, and so you're hung up on all the directing and all the lighting and everything else that's going on in the story, rather than the story itself, because we know those stories so well. So maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know.
I think To Serve Man as well is a one that, you're saying a lot of them you can still get a lot out of them once you know the twist, but I think To Serve Man is a one that once you know the twist, there's not a lot else going on there.
Maybe. It's not one of the best episodes for exploration of the human condition, or the not just humanoid condition. And I think you're right. Like, once you and there were episodes, I don't think it's a bad thing that there were those episodes that really deliver that punch at the end. And you go, whoa, I wasn't expecting that at all. But like you say, once you've seen them, they're worth rewatching, but you don't find those layers, I suppose, that you might do in other episodes.
I should perhaps mention the more recent versions of the Twilight Zone. Have you rated any of them? Did you like any of them?
I actually, there was an episode called The Collection that had Jessica Simpson in, which I think was the 2002 series. I like the 2002 series better, I think, than the 80s series, but there were still some good episodes of that. But The Collection, I actually ran a role-playing game based on that story. Because I really liked how that progressed. I liked the fact that, and it's a story that we've seen before, in the new exhibit, for example. It's a similar kind of thing where someone gets turned into a doll, or that kind of situation. But I just liked how that progressed, how she had come in as a babysitter and was kind of fresh and excited and saw all these dolls and was slightly creeped out, but not too much. And then then she got turned into a doll. And the whole story, the whole role-playing game story was based on that, and it went down really well. And people were like, "Did you write this? This is great!" And I was like, no, no, it's the Twilight Zone. But there was one from the 80s. There's a few from the 80s that I thought were very good, and I think they have that similar thing of once you know the twist, it doesn't detract from the story. And I think the ones that were good from the 80s did that well. There was one, I think it was called Comedian, where this comedian stole other people's jokes, and then he ended up in hell having to recount how he had done not very nice things to people. And that was what the audience wanted, and they were laughing at him, and it was really cringy. It was like, not in a cringy way of watching, but it was very uncomfortable to watch. But I thought that was done very well. I thought the acting was good, and I think they get a lot of flack because they don't feel like the Twilight Zone. They feel like another type of series. Like an adjacent series, like Tales of the Unexpected or whatever. I think, I don't know quite how they picked which stories they were going to use for the 80s ones or the 2000s ones.
I really liked, of the 80s ones, I think it was one of the very first episodes, Saturday with Bruce Willis.
Yes.
Which is written by Holland Ellison. It's partly because I think Bruce Willis is underestimated as an actor, in that he's really, really good. And he really sells that idea of a man who realizes he hasn't been great to other people being replaced by a nicer version of himself. And he sells the kind of the feeling that he's kind of going, no, I can get better, and this nicer version of himself's going, no, it's too late for that, I'm a better version of you, I'm replacing you. And it's quite sad.
I wonder if actually that's a good point. There was always a hopefulness within the original Twilight Zone. There were very few episodes that had that kind of ending of too late. Too late, that's it, you're done. There was always a kind of idea that you could get better, and that you could improve, and that you could change who you were and change how you behaved towards other people and within your life. And I think some of those newer episodes don't have that behind them, and I think it's a more cynical.
It's quite 80s, isn't it? It's quite you snooze, you lose sort of thing.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah,
you've had your chance. Now it's my chance, sort of thing.
I mean, they got in a lot of pretty famous or pretty celebrated writers and directors for those episodes, and they weren't bad stories, but I think they just didn't have the feel.
No.
But again, they were good on their own. If they were called, the new zone of difference, or that was awful. That was the worst title in the world. But you know what I mean? If they were called something like Else, then I think they would have maybe been more successful. But they had tied themselves to the original series. In themselves, they were cancelled several times because of one thing or another, because the ratings weren't good enough or whatever. So, I think there is a nostalgia in them that we look back and go, well, no, that was the good one. But I think there were some really good episodes. And, the Button episode ended up as a film movie, for whatever reason. I don't know why. Because I thought that was an episode where once you knew the twist of it, there wasn't much else to the story.
No.
And yet it became a long film.
The entire story is basically, what if this happens?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, then that's the whole story. Once you know where it's going, that's it.
And there was another film, I can't remember what it was called, but it was with William Shatner on a plane again, and it was called like Nightmare at 40,000 feet or something like that.
They've got sort of not Stonehenge, but they've got ancient stones in the hold of this plane or something. They're evil.
And you think, you are. I see what you're doing here, but I'm not sure it worked. You know, that happens a lot. But you know, things are always going to riff on other things. The Twilight Zone, as I said, riffed on previous things. It riffed on comics stories. It riffed on older series than the Twilight Zone, Playhouse 9, and things like that. So it's just the way that it is done. Is it done in a different way? And is it done in a more interesting way? Is it done in a better way? Or is it not? Is it just strung out into a movie length nonsense?
Yeah, it's kind of looking now as if the Jordan Peele one has finished as well, because there don't seem to be any more of them on the horizon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, I liked the Jordan Peele ones. I thought he was a good narrator for the series, and it was nice to have a new series after so long. But again, I'm not sure they felt like the Twilight Zone. I'm not sure they had that weight behind them, or that thought behind them. I think they were done with love in relation to the other series, but again, I would have preferred it to have not been called the Twilight Zone. I would have preferred it to have been called something else.
There's some of them that seem to miss the point entirely. I mean, that I can't. Is it called 8 or something? The one about the octopus.
I don't remember. I've only seen them once, and since we haven't had a television license for some time now, I don't really. I'm not able to watch them again. But I don't. The thing is, I don't have a memory of them. I'm sure I enjoyed them at the time, but they've blended into all the other One Step Beyonds and other things like that. That I've seen in the past. That I don't remember them specifically as Twilight Zone episodes.
That's how I feel about them as well. Yeah, but
I enjoyed them at the time, and I watched all of them. So, I mean, if there was another series, whether it's presented by Jordan Peele or not, I think I would definitely watch it. I'd like to see what it's like. But there's the thing is, you can only do a story so many times, and there's only so many ways to recreate different situations that have a twist, or have a strange situation that someone is put in. And I think that's really hard to get. And I think that Rod Serling's strength was that because he was a dramatist and he was a good television writer, he saw them as kind of small plays to be put on. And I don't know if we see television like that now. We see television as something to have on whilst you're doing something else. Quite often, we don't sit down round the television and wait for the episode to come on. We don't. No. We've moved on from that point, and I think it is something that is very hard to do. And I appreciate Black Mirror, and I appreciate Inside Number 9 for trying to do something again like that, and not tying it to the Twilight Zone. Just saying this is a separate series that is exploring something different, and I think there's a strength in that, and I would quite like to see other series that explore different aspects of not even the supernatural, because I think that was a strength of the Twilight Zone, that every episode was different. I mean, some of them had similar themes, as we've talked about, but if you don't like paranormal, there's all the episodes don't have ghosts in them. There's lots of episodes that have different things in them, but some of the episodes do have ghosts. Or if you like sort of pure sci-fi, space or whatever, there are some episodes with that in, and the exploration of what if we go to other planets. But if you don't like that, there are other episodes. And I think that there were so many episodes of it that it had something that everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people could take something from.
Yeah. Well, our allocated time is rapidly disappearing into the Twilight Zone. So I'll thank you again for joining me this evening, Elaine.
Thank you.
It was nice to meet up again after 8.5 years.
It was lovely to chat about something I really enjoy. So thank you for that. That was a nice surprise.
That was The Twilight Zone, with my special guest star, Elaine Bladukiene. Join us again in another 4 weeks for more interesting and cozy chat. The October Club was presented by Paul Ferry, with special guest star Elaine Bladukiene. The original music was by Peter Falconer. The show was produced and edited by Paul Ferry.